The government has announced $320 billion in fiscal and balance sheet support designed to support the community through an enhanced safety net, preserve the relationship between employers and employees, support employment, maintain organisational capital through support for cash flow and the availability of credit, enhance firm survival by modifying business and labour regulations, unblock disrupted supply chains, and importantly, enhance business and consumer confidence. The direct fiscal measures are equivalent to around 10% of GDP and are larger than any support package provided by government in the past 50 years. Around $10 billion of support has been distributed over the past 3 weeks, with around 3 times that amount expected over the next month. This support has already had a material impact on confidence, and it has significantly improved our prospects of recovering well from this pandemic. The final shape of this shock remains hard to predict because it depends on how the virus's transmission unfolds in the face of efforts to suppress it, both in Australia and overseas. Over time, the uncertainty around the progression of the virus will diminish and more economic activity will return, but new challenges will have emerged. Some jobs and businesses will have been lost permanently. The Treasury will increasingly turn to these challenges, continuing to advise on policy settings and reforms that will enable our country to prosper in a world that in many ways will look largely the same, but may have also changed in some important and sustained ways. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to provide this update.
Thanks very much, Dr Kennedy. Now, we have a speakers list which we'll rotate on 15-minute allocations considering how spread out the committee is, and I get the first opportunity. So, Secretary, can I start at the very beginning? And when did you first become aware of the outbreak of COVID-19, and in particular, when did you first start becoming concerned about the economic impacts?
In January, the Treasury was aware. I was aware personally of the impacts. There were briefings on the coronavirus that through cabinet processes that I was a part of, and as soon as we were aware, we began developing advice, excuse me, around how the virus might impact the economy. We spoke about it in the Senate estimates.
When I took the question on notice and hasn't been answered yet.
Oh, okay.
In terms of when you started working on the first economic response.
Well, the first pieces of advice were conveyed in late January. I'm quite certain of that. I'll double check it. But do you mean in terms of a fiscal response, Chair, or do you mean in terms of understanding the shock and what it might mean for the Australian economy?
I think both of those things, because
so in terms of
surely one led to the other.
Yeah. Well, in terms of understanding what it meant for the Australian economy, it was in January. In terms of developing a fiscal response, it was that occurred as we came to understand what the nature of the shock might look like. Initially, the focus around the virus was what it might do to the Chinese economy and how that might spill more widely. There was probably less focus initially on the worldwide transmission of the disease. As that became clearer, more work took place. But I might be able to just help you. I may have just a quick timing here for you, I think. The preparations for the first economic package, to answer your second question, started on the 1st of March.
And do you have information on the second and third packages, when they started?
I'll give you some dates. To be honest, we never stopped working on the response from the day we started, because as it was unfolding, it was clear that a response would be needed, but this was not a set and forget type of episode. So preparations for the first economic package commenced on the 1st of March. The package was announced on the 12th of March. We continued to think about the economic response. Shortly after the first package, I briefed the National Cabinet with Phil O, the Governor, and it was in that National Cabinet that
PC, yeah.
Advised around the mass gatherings, for example. It was very apparent to me immediately that we were moving perhaps even more quickly than I anticipated towards changes that would affect the Australian economy over and above even what we anticipated in that first response.
Sorry, when was that, when you briefed the
I haven't got that precise date, but I think it was would have been about, if the package was announced on the 12th, the day after probably.
Right.
I'll double check
Yeah.
for you. The second package was announced, so preparations effectively began after the first package was announced. The second package was announced on the 22nd of March, 12 days later. And in the release of that package, the Prime Minister made clear that and the Treasurer that it was not the end of the work. And we had already begun through that period thinking about effectively the pattern of responses. So what was apparent to me for that, the second package response, was how important it was for the government to consider the type of safety net, enhanced safety net it took in place. So it announced the job seeker package in that second package. We certainly understood at that time that there was going to be be a need for support for business and this issue around preserving employer-employee relationships.